Hey guys, Stephen here from Vanguard Tactics, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my opponent and his yellow card and why we need to change 40k and competitive 40k for the better. So recently I competed at the LGT, and before I go into this video I just would like to say a couple of things, because this is going to be a difficult video and it's hopefully going to be a bit of an eye-opener for some people, but I don't want that to take away from how good the event was at the LGT in the London Grand Tournament. So Zach, the organiser of the LGT, did a fantastic job after last year. The venue was brilliant, the terrain was fantastic, the mission pack was good. So on the whole, it's a really, really good event, and the guys at Hellstorm Gaming that streamed did a really brilliant job, and it was a pleasure to play on stream. And if you follow Hellstorm Wargaming, you can check out my game that I played on stream against Josh, and we had a wicked game. And I had, including the Invitational, so I had 2 games in the Invitational which were both amazing, and then I had 4 games in the main event which were also brilliant. I just had one very difficult game which I'm going to talk about. Now, I am going to do a full review of the LGT, and because I think that's really important, especially for you guys that are interested in my Ultramarines list, how I've got on with it since Battlefield Birmingham. I am going to do a full review, but I wanted to film this as well. So I'm not going to name any names, okay? So all I'm going to do in this video is I'm just going to recall the facts, and that's all I can do, okay? And I'm going to give you guys an idea of what you can do if you're ever put into the situation that I was put into, okay? So that's my objective with this video, is number one, for you guys watching to understand what you can do, what you were empowered to do at the event in order to make sure you don't go through what I just had to go through. And number two, what I would like us as a community to do together to change competitive 40k for the better. And you know, really here I'm talking to tournament organisers, I'm talking to, you know, everyone that has a influence in the game, okay? I want us to come together and bring out a format that really works, and more importantly, a code of conduct that we all abide by, okay? And that is also enforced, okay? Because 2 weeks ago, I did a video with Neil Kerr, the head referee from the ETC, and I've had so much positive feedback about that video, and it was a real eye-opener for people, and Neil did a great job. And Neil was meant to be at this event. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it through life happens, and that was a real shame. So the purpose of that video was to tell you guys what you can do if you're put in a very awkward situation by an opponent, okay? What in how you should talk to a referee and how you can basically get their input. But that didn't go far enough, because I had to go through what I've been through once before. So you might remember one of the first video, or I think it was the first video I filmed, I played this same opponent. That was the worst game of 40k I've ever played, and I've always said I would never play him again. I would never play that person ever again, because I do not, at the end of the day, yeah, I make videos, and this is, you know, Vanguard Tactics is, you know, becoming a business, which is fantastic, and I'm really pleased about that. And don't get me wrong, I want to see my ranking do well on the ITC and for my team and everything, but I'm not going to spend 3 hours of my life playing somebody that is awful to play against. This is a hobby. I do this because I enjoy it. And I don't really want to be making this video, because I should be talking about how positive the event was. But unfortunately, it's been tainted a little bit by the actions of basically one person. So let me go over what happened, and then what I would like to see happen in the future, as I said, as a community. So just to give you guys a little bit of a feel for what actually happened on the day in this game. So like I said 2 weeks ago to Neil on that interview that if I ever match this person again, I would just refuse to play them, okay? Now, I was then contacted by the TO asking me not to, and I've got a screenshot to prove that, because I was happy just to say, look, have the game. I'm not interested. My goal was to go 4-1 at the tournament, and I achieved that, so I can't be more happier, okay? But because I was asked not to, I decided I would play the game. And I also thought I would give this individual a new chance. And I said to them at the start of our game, look, this will be water under the bridge as far as I'm concerned. This person sort of spoke to me a few weeks ago, about a month ago or so, saying that they apologised for their actions in our previous game, and I thought, look, I'll give them one more chance. And that's all I ever give, is one chance. So from here on, it was very much, okay, water under the bridge, we used a chess clock and everything. Now, the one condition that I had that I would play this game is that I would have a referee at my table the whole game. Now, number one, if you're thinking as a tournament organiser, well, I can't, afford to do that. I can't afford to have a referee at a table the whole game just for this one individual. Then we need to talk about that at the end, because I agree, you shouldn't have to do that. Okay, but this is why it was needed at my game. So I've got, James there who's refereeing, and James is a lovely, lovely guy and did an absolutely fantastic job at refereeing. Okay, and he's very clear with his rules. And the problem was, in my opinion, that James wasn't given the power to act on what he was seeing and what was happening. Okay, and this is solely my opinion. So we get to the first stage. My opponent goes first, and so he sets up first, I set up second, and I'm making it very clear they're touching cover, touching cover, touching cover. So basically all of my units are touching cover, and if they're not touching cover, then they can't be seen, so I'm not too worried. And basically I had purposefully, there was like an L-shaped ruin. Okay, so imagine this is a wall. I put my repulsor up against that ruin, the hull of my repulsor, and also exactly 50% of it this side and 50% of it this side. Okay, so very particular way of deploying, so that whichever way my opponent deployed on, I would get a cover save, and I'm definitely 50% obscured, and that's obviously clearly my intention there. So my opponent goes first, rolls their hits, and I'll go to roll my saves, and I said, okay, cool, so I'm -2 or 3, and I'm gonna get a cover save, obviously. And he was like, no, you're not. And I said, well, I think I am. I'm 50% obscured because of the way I've deployed. And then he started to argue that I wasn't touching the terrain, and I said, James, could you please clarify either way? And James said, no, Steve, based on the rules, is touching cover, which I am with the hull of my repulsor, and I'm 50% obscured. But this wasn't enough for my opponent. He argued again, saying that my base wasn't touching it, when this is a guy that has got 2 of the same units on the other side of the table. And I said, look, my repulsor is bigger than my base. There is no way I can actually get this to touch that piece of terrain. Now, by that same logic, I could also say to him that he would never be able to charge my repulsor. So this is the thing, guys, is that he's an individual that wants everything his own way. Now, the game of 40k is a gentleman's game. It's a game of give and take, all right? So James, the problem here is that James ruled, look, Steve is in cover, but there's a constant argument there. And finally, James said, look, this is my final decision. Steve is getting a cover save because you measure from the hull of this vehicle. So anyway, I get my cover save. And then later on in the game, it didn't go very well for me. My first turn whiffed a bit on some of my rolls, and unfortunately I lost the repulsor, but hey, that's the game, right? But this isn't my problem. And as I said to you already, I was happy to just forfeit this game completely, just concede, all right? Now, the next thing is, we're in my turn, and I've got aggressors that can see this opponents' units, they can draw line of sight, and I can draw range to another model in that unit, but that's closer. And in the targeting rules of the rulebook, as long as you can see the unit and you can measure range to a model in that same unit, they don't need to be the same person. So you don't need to see the guy you're in range of. Okay, they're different things. So again, I said, look, I'm going to shoot my 5 aggressors, and they got like 100 shots or whatever it is, against those 5 scouts. And bear in mind, we're on a chess clock. He says, no, you can't do that. And I said, well, why? Because I'm in range and said all this. And I said, okay, fine. Well, James, could you please clarify the rules of... And obviously I'm getting pretty annoyed by this already, that this is the second argument now that we've kind of had over essentially the basic rules of the game. And James has said, no, well, if we look at the rules, you need to be able to see a unit and be able to, be in range of a model of that unit, which was exactly what I said. And again, this wasn't good enough for my opponent, and proceeded to argue with James about this for the next 5 minutes, and said, well, why don't you just roll your dice as if it was like 3 in range, and see if they kill it anyway, which I shouldn't even have to do. I should just be able to roll all the dice, get it done with nice and quickly, and obviously remove those scouts. But again, it was a case of, I said quite firmly, look, if you want to argue with James about the rules, then you can do this on your time. And he proceeded to say, no, keep it on you, just carry on. So I can't really carry on if he's having an argument with James. Okay? And the problem with this individual is that, no, it's not an argument, I'm not arguing, it's just a discussion. Unfortunately, when you play sport, that is an argument. When you're arguing a rule, that's not a discussion. You don't discuss rules. They're pretty black and white, really. Especially when a referee has given his rule. You can have a discussion with an opponent, but with a referee, you listen, and if the referee says jump, you say how high. And it is that clear. Like if we were in a rugby game, then let's say I'm the team captain, my opponent or one of my players gouges an eye or something that he shouldn't do, right? I go over to the referee and I say, ref, what was the penalty for? The referee will say, he gouged him in the eye, I saw it, and my ruling is that's a penalty. I do not then discuss how much my player gouged or didn't gouge that eye, or how many eyes. That's irrelevant. The rule is set, the referee's made his decision, and I as a captain go, okay, cool, I'll go tell my team not to do that again. And then if I was to argue, or my player was to argue, they'd be yellow carded. Straight away. Yellow card, you do not argue or discuss with the referee, you're carded and you're put in the sin bin, and another one of those, a second argument would be a red card, and you would forfeit, that player would not be playing for the rest of the game, okay? So at 2 points already, this player is argued with the referee. Now there's another thing happened actually in his first turn, that I said to him, look, if you want to move a model when you're not sure where it's meant to be, what I'd like you to do is put a dice next to that model. So this was in his first turn actually. He moved all his things forward, moved his characters, and then said, I actually want to get my guys out, I want to disembark. And obviously you do that at the start of the movement phase. And by this point he's moved like 5 or 6 models, so we don't actually know where any of his army is. It's only what he thought, or where he thought he deployed. And I thought, it was a goodwill gesture, okay, cool, go back, do that. But the problem here is, that then set the tone for the rest of the game. It kept moving, removing, and we never really knew where anything really was. And there was a point at the end of the game where, I'd worked out that his repulsor would end up moving like 14 inches after moving it back, moving it back, until he goes, oh, actually, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. I did move too far. But this is a game where you have to constantly watch that person's movement and rolls. You can't just sit there and chill out and relax. It's just not that type of game, and it's just not a very nice way to play the game. So Anyway, moving on. The next thing was that came up was I was doing some individual shots to Gulliman with some of my snipers, and I'm pretty sure I chipped off a couple of wounds. A wound counter was put down next to him, but later on in the game, that wound marker had disappeared. And I said, "Oh, where's Gulliman's wound marker gone?" And it wasn't a normal dice; it was like an 8-sided dice. And I could see that there was an 8-sided dice, the same one we had used, and there was like a number 7 on it, okay, facing up. And he then said to me, "Oh, he's only took 1 wound, turn it to 8 and then put it back on Gulliman." And I was saying, "Well, I think I've actually done more than that." Now, he was like, no, it's only 1. So I said, "Okay, fine, I'll give you benefit of the doubt." But here's the problem. If it's your mistake in the game, or if it's your opponent's mistake, as far as I'm concerned, you should give your opponent the benefit of the doubt. So if I believe that I've done 2 wounds and he's removed his wound counter off his model, then in that discussion, it should go to the player that didn't remove the wound marker, right? I'd be like, if that was me, I'd be like, "Look, okay, I'm not sure, because obviously I moved it earlier, I'm sorry about that. I'll tell you what do you think it is?" And I'd say, "I think I've done 2, okay, I'll put it to that." That's how any other conversation would go with any other player that I've ever played against. Because you realise, oh, you should move that, shouldn't have done that, okay, cool, you go with the benefit of your doubt of your opponent. You can't have every single thing try and be, like I said, it's a game of give and take. So we have this problem with the cover. He's wasted my time arguing with James about the hitting and stuff. And anyway, we get to turn 4, the end of his turn 4, and he clocks out in the combat phase. Okay, he clocks out, and he then tries to make out that he wants 5 seconds of my time in the next turn. That he was meant to clock it over to me. Literally, I think what happened was Gulliman had killed my Calgar, and I said, "Okay, cool, I'm going to spend 2 CPs to fight." I literally picked up 7 dice, and he then ran over to the clock and hit it and realised he was out of time, and wanted to claim that those seconds of me saying, "Okay, I'm going to play 2 CPs." Yet he hadn't actually finished his turn. He still had other charges to do, he still had other combats to do that he charged in with and stuff. So he's obviously timed out, okay? And he argued with James about his time, saying, "Well, I want some of Steve's time, I want, that means I'll get another 5 seconds next time." And James was like, "No, you've clocked out. It's up to Steve if he wants to share any of his time with you." And I was obviously put in a very difficult situation there. My opponent's clocked out at turn 4, so still 2 turns to go. I've still got like 20 minutes left or whatever. And, I just sort of said, "No, you're not having any of my time. It's unfair to ask me that you can have any. And also, it's not my fault that you've clocked out. And also, you've already wasted enough of my time arguing with James about the rules." So anyway, he carries on arguing with James about it. And I'm stood there like for another 3 minutes, just waiting for this argument to finish. And again, James has to say, "That's my final word on it." And at this point, he's argued with James 3 times. We had the cover bit, we had the hitting thing, we're now having a time issue, and all while he's wasting more of my time. So the next thing crops up, literally straight after this. I roll my hits with Calgar, I re-roll my misses, I then roll my wounds, and I just wound with everybody. I rolled well, wounded with all of them against Gulliman. And I said to my opponent, "Right, there's your rolls, you carry on, that's your saves." And he said, why are you re-rolling your wounds?" And I said, "I didn't. I re-rolled my hits, my failed hits, and they are my wounds, so I'm not re-rolling those." And he then says, "Well, I didn't see it." And then says, "But you had 2 2s there." So then James says, "Well, I've just watched Steve roll those dice, and they are your saves. They're the saves you have to make." And he's like, no, I didn't see it, and sort of had this thing with the 2 2s or whatever. And then basically, I'm just there looking like, I'm not re-rolling this, because that's what he's trying to get me to do. And James has said, "Look, I've watched Steve roll that day or Saves roll those dice, and he just refused to do it. And again, for a few more minutes, just arguing, and it's just, the referee has given his decision again, and there's just this constant argument. And in my opinion, it should have been carded there and then. He should have been given a yellow card for arguing with the referee for the 4th time. The problem is that there's some other things that happen in the game, and I'm not really going to go into it because sometimes mistakes are made. I'm not talking about the little things here, because we play a game of 40k. It's sometimes you might pick up an extra dice or something, in all those little things that happen in like, you just work it out between you, like a couple of good guys, you just go, oh sorry, I rolled an extra dice there, I'll just do that again or something, and that happens. And that's one I've not got a problem with. I've got a problem with this constant arguing with rules or deliberately wasting somebody's time, okay? And James should have carded this opponent there and then at the table, and that didn't happen. And it's not James's fault, it's because he wasn't given the power to do that. So then I go over to the tournament organiser and I make an official complaint, literally like what I've done here. I explained the reasons why I'm complaining, because number one, the game was horrific. Like, it was bad. It wasn't played with any good conduct, and I shouldn't have had to go through that. Okay. Now, this is the problem, that because I launched an official complaint, it turns out I wasn't the only person to do that. This was his second complaint of the day. And I know that other player really, really well. And he said to me what this opponent had done in his game. Things like using stratagems that don't even exist. And because we were using the same armies, it's obviously, he wasn't going to try those tricks with me because he knows that I know that those stratagems don't exist. So the other person, Dan, who launched a complaint against this opponent, laid out loads of things and said, look, I had to be pretty stern with him. But you should never have to get stern with somebody, or whatever you want to call it. But blatantly using rules that do not even exist in that codex, not by mistake, is awful. Like, if I ever did that, I'd feel terrible about it. Like, I wouldn't just make up a stratagem or whatever. And it's no excuse not to, there's no excuses for doing that. And then finally, later on, so he's now given a yellow card for his second complaint, but really, 2 complaints and his conduct at my table, and in my opinion, should have been a red card. Should have been escorted out of the building. And it doesn't really matter about the results. That's not really for me to say what should have happened in the other games that he had won or whatever, and got him to that point. But if a player's, showing that consistent conduct at events and manages then to, wherever they place, doesn't really matter. But the simple fact is that these players, these types of people, are going to events, and no doubt, this is just my opinion on this one, but if they were willing to do this against myself and against Dan, then they've probably done it against other people as well. Either use these stratagems that didn't exist based on what Dan had said to me, or done similar things to what that they tried to do to me, either waste my time or argue about certain rules, remove wound counters, this kind of stuff. They've probably done it in those games as well, because it doesn't just happen. Like, as I said, like, I've played this person before and they've done the exact same thing. And in the previous tournament, I also heard some rumours about some pretty shady play from this character. So this isn't a one-time thing. So just to top this off, in their last game, this person recorded that they scored 42 points. 42 points, which is the maximum amount of points you can get in an ITC format mission. And against the army he was playing, it's virtually impossible. and I mean literally impossible to do this. And then then the referees have to go over, sort it all out, and it turns out that it wasn't 42. It was, I think they said 40. But was it really? The question remains. Because this guy was playing against a demon horde, I believe, and you do not get hold more against that army. You just doesn't happen, especially when there's only 4 objectives on the table, and the bonus is 1 you have to control in your opponent's deployment zone. That's not going to happen. Even for, I doubt somebody even got that for 3 turns, and then they would be on 39 points, assuming they still got the hold more every single turn. And again, like I said, that just doesn't really happen against that matchup, especially against somebody that's just gone 4-0 to that point. So anyway, a few issues. And my problem here, the wider issue, is not this necessarily individuals' actions, because if it was, I would have just named them, and I haven't done that. What I want to see going forward is, I want to see tournament organisers step things up. Okay, so number 1, I want to start to see that a code of conduct that enforces cards and also disqualifications from events. I want to see that. I am sick of cheating and bad sportsmanship going on in the game of 40k, alright? That needs to change. So I need TOs to step up in, we need to make examples of people that do this, especially if they've got a reputation for consistently doing it. So that's number 1. Number 2, I want to see cards and misconduct and complaints tracked. So if you want your ITC points tracked, I would like Frontline Gaming, BCP, these guys that are collecting all this data to also track complaints, bad sportsmanship and cards. So therefore, if you go to an event and you get a yellow card, when you enter in your next event, the TO has a list of everybody already on a card that season. Because if you're a good player, and my opponent is a good player, I'm not going to take that away from them, they can easily go 3-2 without, too much worry. But in the 2 games where it might be close, and they start to pull shenanigans like this, they can easily take a loss to a draw, or a draw to a win, or a small win to a big win to help them on the points. And that needs to stop, because in my opinion, cards should start to stack. So let's say you get 3 yellow cards over a season, you're banned. So the only way that we can punish these people, because obviously all they care about is winning a game of toy soldiers, the only thing that we can do is take their toys away and stop them from playing. And until we start to make these strides, the game of Warhammer will be, unfortunately, plagued by this. People will talk about it. It will be their experience of their event. And if you're a TO, you don't want this to happen at your event, because it's not good publicity. Like, people will not come to your event because of it. And for this sort, harder action to be taken on players, I'm not going to attend. Because otherwise, no matter how good you get at the game and strategic you are as a best general, if you do play against that 1% of person that's just going to try and win at all costs, it's pretty pathetic, and it's not going to give you a good experience. So that's my final take on things, and I'd love to know your opinion as well, so comment below. What would you like to see happen? How do we take this and make this game more professional, and how do we get TOs to protect their players? Like, TOs, if you're out there listening, then it's your duty to protect the 99% of players, so that they don't feel like the victim, so that they who don't cheat go away with a great experience, and the people that do are made aware of their misconduct, and also then given a chance to improve. Because if there are players with a bad reputation, but then they have a clean season and they don't get any yellow cards over that season, then fantastic, they've reformed, and I'm all about that. So anyway guys, I'd love to know your thoughts, and once again guys, it just reconfirms why you need to know as many rules as you can and really get clear on it so you can watch out for this stuff. So one thing I wanted to add to this video, and obviously I'm recording this after I edited, I completely forgot to tell you guys what you can do if you're in my position. And what I want everyone to start to do is, if you ever feel like you are being misplayed, if you ever feel like there's some unsportsmanlike conduct going on, if you ever feel like that, something in your stomach that it's just not right, and I think you probably know what I mean by this, go get a TO. If something feels really like rules janky, or your opponent's constantly, like as I said earlier, it's a game of give and take. If they're constantly wanting everything to go in their way or their favour, and you just get the impression they're trying to win at all cost, or maybe that they're, consistently doing a certain action, or they're, let's say, always rolling behind terrain or something, and you can't see the dice rolls and they won't re-roll it because you didn't see, then get a TO. Go and talk to a TO. If you don't have any sort of evidence for in that instance, just go up to the TO and say after the game, hey, I played against so-and-so and had a bad experience. These were some of the things that happened in the game, and it just gives the TO a chance to watch them. So here's the thing, if we've got more people coming forward, and let's say in the experience I had, I've launched a complaint, Dan launched a complaint, if one other player launched a complaint, that player would have been red carded, okay? Now, it's very unlikely that somebody should even get a complaint, all right? That's unlikely. So it's not necessarily like telling tales or anything like that. It's just reporting conduct. In most games, there is a referee, they're able to watch absolutely everything. Now, all you're doing is putting it on the radar of the referee or the TO to watch that player. So let's say game one, they get a bad sports vote or something, or they get a complaint against the way that they played. That could literally, the TO, if they're sensible, or referee, will be like, okay, I'll keep an eye on it. And that might just be it. You might just have had a bad game. And if so, that's not a problem. Both of you are going to leave, and you might not have just clicked or got on or whatever it might have been. But then, if somebody else complains in game 2, in game 3, in game 4, in game 5, there's a common denominator here. And it's not you, okay? It is them. So even if both of you didn't get on and you complained to them about your conduct, and maybe they even complained about you and your conduct, you might go away and get 3-4 favourite game votes, and it might have just been a bad game. But the problem is, these kind of very toxic players breed negativity, okay? And therefore they always have bad games, all right? Now, my point is, if you feel uncomfortable, go tell a TO. Then, as Neil said in the last interview that I did, the TO can watch out for it. The TO can make his, judgment then. And if obviously more people do it, then obviously there's cause for concern. If nobody else does it, it's just a bad game, it's not a problem. And, again, going back to a sporting analogy, often, when I played sport and hockey or something, there would be I don't know, maybe a bad tackle or something. You've done wrong. You take it on the chin from the referee and you don't do it again, okay? And you shake your opponent's hand at the end of the game, and it's left like that. That's perfect. But TOs, you can't feel afraid about giving people a card, about giving people a red card and sending them home, because it is the only way you learn, okay? And we need to treat this less like, they've paid £30 or whatever it is to come to an event and play in a tournament. No, don't worry about that one person. Worry about the other 99 people there. That's your concern, because that's actually where your business is. And the people that you send home will learn from this. They will genuinely go, hang on a minute, this is the third event this season I've been kicked out from. At some point, the penny is going to drop that they need to change their behaviour. So, as I said, guys, if you're ever in my position, go tell a TO, okay? Because a lot of these problems wouldn't, happen. It wouldn't take, sometimes sitting in silence and not doing anything and not acting is just as bad as doing it itself. Okay, so sometimes you just got to step up and take action, and hopefully that's what this video is about. It's about constructive criticism, and you know, it's unfair. Like, I don't want you guys to watch this and think it's unfair of like the LGT should have done anything, because how can they be prepared for this? Okay, because the wider tournament scene isn't prepared. Okay, the LGT had one main referee that was not playing, and they obviously had a tournament organised. You've got like 400 or 600 people there, whatever it is. You can't. They could have never seen it coming to have to put one of their referees on a table to watch one game. Okay, because that is not only really annoying, but then that referee is also being taken away from all the other games where they need to circulate. So it's not the LGT's fault, it's more of a case of together, like I said, we need to raise our standards, we need to raise the expectations, and we need to come down harder and firmer on people and faster, and by doing so we'll start to set an example and people will clean up their behaviour. Okay, and as I said, guys, I will do a full review of the LGT, and I don't want you to think of this you know, because I don't want you to think of this as a bad experience of the LGT, because actually it was a really fantastically ran event. It was brilliant, and you know, credit to Zach for running a really, really good event. So I'll, you know, be definitely looking to do the LGT in the future, and hopefully with this video we might cause some action, and that's all I want to happen. So if you know a TO, send this video to them, you know, make them watch it. If you've ever had a bad experience, send it to a referee or whatever, or let's use this video as a vehicle to make change. Okay, so yeah, guys, let me know what you think, and am I right, am I wrong, what would you do, what would you have done? What's your verdict on it? Do you think the card system, which tracks from game to game, tournament to tournament, is the right thing to do? I would love to know your thoughts. But anyway, guys, until the next video, I'll see you guys soon, and take care.